of millions to drop in their tracks is the most important of Tesla's inventions. But in an unprecedented decision, Tesla makes the exploitation of his invention by any single government impossible. He distributes the plans in proprietary segments, like the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle.
He gave it to the English, Canadian, American, and Russian governments so that they had to sit down together, to collaborate if they wanted to realize the whole invention. He realized that people are not conscious enough to handle this information. That's why Tesla put these governments into mutual dependability.
There's some evidence that Tesla had given the plans to the Russians who were on our side at that time. In the 1970s, Aviation Week showed an article on the Russian particle beam weapon, and Tesla's particle beam weapon didn't surface until about 10 years later when Andrei Puharich brought it out, and the schematics exactly matched the Russian particle beam weapon.
Head of U.S. Air Force Intelligence, Major General George Keegan, describes the Soviet system.
And what comes out of the end of this little magnetic tube are pulsed proton beams, 100 billion electron volts, each at energy levels at 10 to the 10 joules. That's just simply more energy than any man has ever conceived of in the United States. And then you have to bend that beam, and you have to burn it through the atmosphere, and you have to find an object to aim it at.
Nikola Tesla sent a proposal to Russian scientists and engineers on May 16, 1935, concerning high voltage and the acceleration of charged particles. He received a list of follow-up questions from them in November of that year.
Military scholars contend that the Soviets achieved a 100% Star Wars defense by 1968.
We had learned through very sensitive sources that the Soviets in 1977 would test in space the most powerful laser in history, 10 times more powerful than any laser we have under development in the U.S. Finally, when I became Chief of Air Force Intelligence, my first act of office was to put out an order stating that this device and this development would be the #1 priority in Air Force Intelligence. So we set up a meeting with 40 or 50 of the top nuclear scientists in the free world, from Edward Teller on down. And these scientists, for 6 years, under a $60 million secret project called Project Seesaw, had been trying to develop an electron beam to shoot down ICBMs, and they'd failed. And now, both in the White House and in the Department of Defense, there is an embarrassed silence as the technicians and scientists on both staffs, now having examined the massive body of research we did in the Air Force, suddenly realize that they may have misinformed the American public.
Was President Ronald Reagan merely attempting to catch up with the Soviets in his development of the Strategic Defense Initiative?
All we can do is make sure that technology becomes the ally and protector of peace, that we build better shields rather than sharper and more deadly swords. In so doing, maybe we can help to bring an end to the brutal legacy of modern warfare.
As a result of America's delays in weaponry development, Tesla's discoveries are only now, nearly 100 years later, being adapted for both offensive and defensive purposes. The latest development? Space-based particle beam satellites.
The paper which showed the technology to make the anti-war machine was eventually published in the proceedings of the International Tesla Society. So it's in the public domain now, how to do it. And what is uncanny is that when one knows today's Star Wars program and the beam weaponry that has been selected, it is almost identical to what was proposed by Tesla.
At the time that I came across the documents, I took it to experts in the aerospace field and asked them to look at his technique for generating high voltages. At the time, the aerospace firm I was working with was working on particle beam technology, and they had a study group that was working on proposals to give to the government on directed energy weapons. I gave that proposal to the Advanced Projects Research Team and asked them to consider it. The only word that I ever got back from them was that they said it was interesting, and they would say no more.
Tesla certainly spoke of a very large series of very powerful weapons. I think that's a reasonable thing, and let's approach it this way. Certainly I'm on record as saying the weapons exist and that several nations have weaponized them. We know that the Russians very early on were interested in things like free energy right out of the vacuum, and they were interested in weapons.
What became of Tesla's weapon? It's never been heard from since. It may be something that's in a closet somewhere. It may be something that's used. It may be in orbit. We don't know.
There is no question today that the Soviet Union has these weapons. And if what I put together is correct, and I'm absolutely convinced it is, 3 other nations of the world also developed those weapons and resoundingly checked the Soviet Union. The other 3 are friendly to the United States, not hostile. And I think that played one great part in the fall of the Soviet Empire. 3 other nations today are indeed working on what I call the Tesla weapons, or really scalar electromagnetic weapons. And these nations are not really friendly to the U.S. at all. So it's a much more dangerous world that has emerged.
In an article published November 3rd, 1998, Bill Gertz of the Washington Times writes, "The Chinese Army is building laser weapons and already possesses particle beam weapons capable of damaging sensors on space-based reconnaissance and intelligence systems. If the People's Liberation Army has beam weapons, what about the U.S. military?" Under promise of anonymity, this Navy SEAL spoke about current capabilities.
We do have particle beam weapons. I've used them. We did underwater tests off the coast of California. The capabilities are awesome. You can knock down a satellite, a ship, a plane, anything.
In the global race for new technology, it appears that Tesla's death beam is not the only secret invention that supposedly disappears when he dies. On July 4th, 1976, the celebration of America's bicentennial, a strange new signal is monitored on ham radio frequencies. This high-pitched chattering is dubbed the woodpecker signal by the Central Intelligence Agency. They have no idea what it is, but they are able to triangulate its source to a Soviet transmitter in Latvia.
The Soviets had experimented with creating artificial aurora. Not sure what their objective was, but I think it was probably designed to prove that you could project very low frequency energy over the horizon, over great distances, and cause certain effects.
You can induce virtually any effect that a chemical can cause in a living system with an external, primarily extremely low frequency magnetic field. My personal feeling is that primarily I think it was designed to communicate with their submarines.
On July 13, 1977, at 9:19 p.m., the woodpecker signal abruptly stops. A strange corona forms around Edison electric power generators servicing New York City, and the entire city is suddenly plunged into darkness, creating chaos and confusion. The blackout is similar in its effects to Tesla's Colorado Springs experiment that overloads and sets ablaze the local electrical power plant.
Things start to brown out. We started seeing very strange things happen to New Yorkers who went berserk. It was literally absolutely dangerous to be there in New York City. And it was a headache for police and who knows, all the security people around.
Was it Tesla's secret that electricity could alter the mental state of human beings? If so, was that secret delivered into the wrong hands? And who is responsible for the Tesla-inspired program known as HARP, a government project some experts believe is the first stage of an entirely new phase in weapons technology?
War or peace? Which does science serve best? Tesla described himself not as an inventor, but as a discoverer. But with discovery comes responsibility. Tesla knew this when he developed HARP technology, and many think that his fear of what might happen if HARP fell into the wrong hands motivated him to keep his discovery under wraps.
HARP exists because Tesla theorized back in the 30s that he would be able to stimulate the magnetic field of the Earth in such a way that he would actually be able to create a shield around the city. HARP is basically a design experiment in terms of atmospheric physics where a large array of antennas, it's not just one antenna, it's a very large array, it covers several acres, are broadcasting into the ionosphere of the planet a very, very complex series of waveforms. And these waveforms are designed to specifically couple in with the ionosphere, which is a resonant cavity.
This concept involves heating up the ionosphere in a manner similar to a giant microwave oven.
That a small input, like a pulse of a certain number of watts in, can create a large output, because whether accidentally or intentionally, it's possible to tap into this sea of energy around us. It surrounds us and goes through our bodies and is everywhere throughout space.
HARP's original designer conceives it as a shield for missile defense that can fry the circuitry of incoming bombs.
HARP was designed for a number of applications. It really was not set up as a weapon. If you read the patents, I was thinking of ways to use it defensively.
He also claims that by superheating portions of the upper atmosphere, HARP can affect global weather patterns, a concept